implemented nuclear power plants and light rail and all that stuff, or are they interested in any free market solutions?
Well, they're interested in doing it the way that Alexander Hamilton did it, the way Lincoln did it, which is that in our system, read the Constitution, the United States Congress establishes currency and credit policies. And what we ought to do is, instead of what we have now, which is currency and credit policies that favor the worst billionaires, swindlers, and killers in world history, we ought to do something for the general welfare, which means that build a nuclear power plant, build a mass transit system, build water purification systems. You get the credit to do it. You want to carry out some kind of stock fraud? No, we cut you off and put you in jail instead.
Doesn't that concern you, though, having decentralizing that much power to
Well,
government?
look at the moonshot.
Well,
look at it from the standpoint of the moonshot. How did we get to the moon?
Yeah, it's government power, but more often than not.
No, but what the government did, see, this is, the money, this is the interesting thing. How does government spend money that's not inflationary, that isn't stealing from people? There's things like the moonshot. And that, the private sector builds. Right, this is what most people don't know about the American system of economics. Right, and that's why we're out here. The free trade system is British. It's imperial. Right, Wall Street is acting like an imperial power. We don't need them. You need private inventors. You need private businesses. You don't need speculators.
So you're familiar with like the X Prize that was done in Rattan, the X Prize for having an airplane that can go into outer space? You're familiar with what they just did that a few years ago?
I think so.
The X Prize was privately funded,
Okay.
and it was a prize for having the first airplane that can, or vehicle that can go up into outer space.
Hypersonic?
Yes,
Hypersonic.
Rattan was one of the main designers there, but Virgin.
He probably knows more than I know about this thing.
But at a much lower cost, the private sector competing for money can do things much better. I mean, I'm glad we went to the moon, but that could have been done privately as well.
Well, see, the scary thing
Unfortunately,
is where
when you
are we
centralize power, there's a huge amount of waste.
See, the problem is that, how old are you now? In your 30s, you're probably somewhere around
I'm
20.
43.
43.
And he's youthful.
Franklin Roosevelt
Excellent compliment.
died in 1945. Since then, the United States government has essentially been owned by the London-centered financial cartels. So you have no experience whatsoever of a government which is actually run by the people for the general welfare. It hasn't happened in your lifetime.
Not in my lifetime in this country.
And
But I do have experience with other governments.
And the problem is that you're afraid, what most people think they're afraid of when they're afraid of the government is private enterprise. Because we have a government that's owned by private enterprise right now. That's our problem.
One that's funded by private enterprise.
Well,
But that's our
owned by
system.
big corporations.
Oh, this
No,
is
it's
how
different.
But it's
This is
a cooperation. It's a
$23 trillion
corporatist
in bailouts committed to the private banking system.
Now, how do you guys
And
feel
chairman
about the?
of the Federal Reserve doesn't know where the money went.
But didn't you say that that LaRouche would like to have had the bailout of GM earlier?
Not the bailout of GM.
Retooling. What's the difference?
The difference is exactly the problem with a bailout is you're giving money to people who are then speculating. That's what's been going on with AIG and everybody else. If you have directed credit, the way Hamilton wrote about in his Defense of Manufacturing, right, then you're directing credit into a private sector, but for production. And that's why what my husband's bringing up about FDR is it used to have a heavily regulated banking system. We had anti-usury laws.
But that predates FDR by 40 years. So it's the Federal Reserve.